Hi, I'm Stephen Fleener. I'm the creator of the Visual Non-Glossary, and I'm really excited to be telling you all about it. The Visual Non-Glossary is a really unique approach for students to engage in small group, structured conversations where they're really interacting in a student-centered way to build meaning around vocabulary concepts and the academic language behind them. And what makes it really unique is that it employs structured visuals, which are a new approach to engaging students in small group instruction, because structured visuals show students all of the information that they need in order to infer what a word means at deep levels and in relationship to other words as they're building academic language and they're building conceptual understanding of academic concepts. Let me show you an example. Let's take a look at the vocabulary word fossil. If I search for the vocabulary word fossil in Google Images, I'll find a lot of different examples of fossils. These are all great examples of fossils. And as a teacher, I completely encourage using lots of different examples, visuals of different examples within a single lesson. But the problem with these images is they don't fully convey exactly what a fossil is, how it's formed, and how it's related to other concepts and content areas. So for example, looking at this image alone, we might understand that a fossil is a skeleton, but we don't necessarily understand, if we're completely new to the concept of a fossil, we don't necessarily understand that a fossil is an impression of a skeleton, nor do we understand that it's formed over millions of years, nor do we understand that it's formed as a series of geological processes, as well as is used as evidence for evolution. If we look instead at a structured visual for a fossil, we can see that a structured visual of a fossil shows the progression of millions of years to form this fossil, this very same fossil. And it also shows a fossil's relationship to a living organism and how this relates to geological processes. And we can use this visual as an anchor of a lesson to talk about fossils and to extend our understanding about how fossils are related to evolution, change over time, for example. But most importantly, this is not an anchor that can be used just as a teacher's instructional aid. It's an anchor that can be used for students to relate back to as they're progressing through a lesson about fossils, to really have a clear, deep understanding about what fossils are and how they're related to other concepts within the grade level. In addition, the Visual Non-Glossary offers 3 guiding questions for every single vocabulary word and every single visual. And these guiding questions are designed to be aligned to Bloom's taxonomy at different levels. And they're designed to have students practice using these vocabulary words in different contexts. So in all 3 of these questions, the STEM uses the word fossil so that students are going to be practicing using the word fossil verbally with their peers, as well as in a whole group setting in structured conversations. And by the end of the lesson, this will mean that all students are very familiar with the word fossil. They're very comfortable with using it. And honestly, if we ask a student at the end of the lesson what they learned in that lesson, they're probably going to say the word fossils. And they're probably then going to be able to elaborate, to go into depth, because the depth and complexity is built into the questioning as it connects back to these visuals. But the Visual Non-Glossary does not just provide visuals. It actually provides a lesson plan for every single visual. Let me show you what that looks like. At the Visual Non-Glossary, if I go to science, for example, let's say I'm a science teacher. Let's say I'm, in fact, a 7th grade science teacher. So I can select 7th grade. And if I'm in Texas, I'll be interested in TEKS. If I'm outside of Texas, I might be interested in the NGSS standard. And I can see all vocabulary words, or I can filter by specific vocabulary words. Let's say I'm interested in 7.11a, for example, is a learning standard that I'm going to be teaching in an upcoming unit. And I want to find a lesson plan that's aligned to 7.11a. So I'll hit filter and I'll see all of the words that appear in this learning standard 7.11a. And let's say I'm interested in an aquifer. Now I get to see that an aquifer appears at the 7th grade TEKS or in the middle school NGSS standards. And then I get to also have a lot of different options, including a PowerPoint or a Google slide lesson plan aligned to that. Let me show you what one of these Google slides or PowerPoint lesson plans looks like. Here is a lesson plan for Aquifer. And all of the lesson plans on the Visual and Glossary are structured very similarly. They have some information for teachers, including accommodation strategies for newcomers or beginner emergent bilingual students. Then they feature the structured visual in a lot of different ways, in the form of a warm-up, in objectives, as well as in structured conversations. And what we can see is that as a teacher planning out this lesson, if I'm going to project this slide to my students, I can really structure a conversation using the QSSSA process, or the question, signal, stem, share, assess method, really easily with my students. So I can choose what the question is going to be. I can choose what the sentence is going to be. It comes preloaded, but I can edit these as a teacher. I can choose what my signal is going to be that the students are going to show that they're ready to share. Maybe all students are going to put their hand on their head and they're going to lower it when they're ready to share the answer to the question. I'm going to decide whether I want my students to share with their elbow or shoulder partner, or maybe their table group. Who's going to go first in that group? Maybe it's the student with the brightest shirt on. And then finally, I get to decide how I'm going to assess my students. In this case, I might decide to call on one or more students randomly. Now, the beauty of the Visual and Glossary is that the vocabulary that's relevant to the grade level standards is built into the visual. And everything about this vocabulary word is within this visual. So if a student has never heard of the vocabulary word aquifer, for example, they can still provide a really great academic sentence in response to these questions. So for example, what is the aquifer? The aquifer is, students are going to use the word aquifer, but they might also use the word pollution. They might talk about the aquifer level. They might talk about what cities can do to maintain the levels of the aquifer, as well as other key vocabulary words like permeable soil, for example. Now, the Visual and Glossary lesson plans are going to show a vocabulary word with the structured visual, but they'll also show structured visuals for other vocabulary words that are related to this word. For example, here's a visual for the vocabulary word pollution, and you can see how it's related to an aquifer because pollution ends up in the aquifer. It will also ask the relationship between these words and show the visuals side by side. And then finally, it will ask those high-level open-ended questions. For example, how else can humans protect the aquifer? So the Visual and Glossary provides multiple opportunities for students to use key vocabulary words verbally in small groups and in the whole class environment in context in a safe and supportive way. Also, every single lesson plan within the Visual and Glossary comes with a whole host of extension activities that can be used before, during, or after the lesson, or at the end of the unit. So, for example, complete the picture is one where students have to draw what they think the rest of the picture looks like. This could be a great preview activity or a great review activity. There's also the opportunity to fill in the blanks where students fill in these labels as they appear in the visual, or maybe again, this is before or after. There's vocabulary connection activities. There are writing activities that incorporate transition words. There's a lot of really great activities and strategies within every single Visual and Glossary lesson. And the key is that it helps students to build academic language. So I encourage you to check out thevisualnonglossary.com and go to subjects and samples. Just start exploring all of the free, approximately 350 free visuals that we have and free lesson plans that go along with it, and see how you can use it in your classrooms today. Thank you, and I hope you love seeing the Visual Non-Glossary.